They say you can feel it when your world is about to fall apart, some subtle shift in the air, a weight in your chest. But for me, it came with the buzz of Mason's phone. Just one text, lighting up the screen as I reached for my coffee. Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait for round 2. Same time tomorrow? For a second, I stared, frozen. I blinked, hoping I'd read it wrong, but no. The message was right there, as clear as day. And the sender? Marcy. His assistant. The same Marcy who brought me flowers for my birthday last month and smiled like she adored me. I felt my knees go weak as a cold realization gripped me. My husband was cheating on me. And with her. I opened his messages, my hands shaking, and found everything. Plans, pictures, flirtations, all of it hidden in plain sight. Upstairs, the shower was running. Mason was humming, oblivious to the storm about to break. But this wasn't going to be a quiet disaster. I wasn't going to sit back and cry while they got away with it. Oh no. If Mason and Marcy thought they could betray me and walk away unscathed, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to destroy the fantasy world they'd built, and I'd start with her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me as I sat at the kitchen table, Mason's phone still clutched in my hand. The evidence was all there, laid bare for me. Months of secret meetups, cheap motels, and dinners that he claimed were business meetings. Every lie he had ever told me was suddenly so obvious. But the thing about betrayal is, it doesn't just hurt, it sharpens you. It gives you focus. And in that moment, I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't just going to confront Mason. That would be too easy. No, I wanted them both to suffer. I wanted their little fantasy to come crashing down around them. The first thing I did was take screenshots of everything. Every text, every photo, every detail of their sordid affair. I emailed it all to myself and locked it away in a private folder. If they wanted to play dirty, I would make sure I had enough ammunition to fight back. Mason strolled into the kitchen a few minutes later, his hair still damp from the shower, a towel slung casually over his shoulder. He smiled at me, that same easy, confident smile that used to make my heart flutter. Now, it just made me sick. "Morning," he said, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. I let him, though it took everything in me not to flinch. "You okay? You look distracted." "Just tired," I replied, forcing a smile. "Didn't sleep well." "Maybe we'll get to bed early tonight," he said, his tone playful as he grabbed his coffee and headed out the door. I watched him go, my stomach churning. Tonight? There wouldn't be any going to bed early. Tonight, I was going to start dismantling his life. That afternoon, I called a friend of mine, Julia. She was sharp, resourceful, and most importantly, she knew how to keep a secret. Julia worked as a paralegal at a big firm downtown and had always been my go-to for advice when things got messy. "Anna, you okay? You sound off," she said as soon as she picked up. "Not really," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Mason's cheating on me." There was a pause. "What?" she said sharply. "How do you know?" "I have proof. Texts, pictures, the works. He's been sneaking around with his assistant for months." Julia let out a low whistle. "Damn. What are you going to do?" "That's why I'm calling you," I said, gripping the phone tightly. "I need your help. I don't just want a divorce. I want to hit them where it hurts." Julia didn't hesitate. "Say no more. Let's start with her. What do you know about Marcy?" That was all the encouragement I needed. Together, Julia and I started digging into Marcy's life. Social media, public records, you name it. It didn't take long to find the cracks. Marcy wasn't the squeaky clean professional she pretended to be. She had skeletons in her closet, debts, failed relationships, a messy family situation. And she was married. Oh, how deliciously ironic. By the time Mason came home that evening, I was ready. I greeted him with dinner and a smile, pretending everything was fine. He didn't suspect a thing as we ate in silence, the air between us thick with tension he couldn't quite place. Long day? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Yeah, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Lots of meetings. Meetings. Right. I almost laughed. Instead, I leaned in and said sweetly, well, I hope all your meetings were worth it, Mason. Because tomorrow, they might not feel so important. He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said lightly, standing up to clear the table. You'll find out soon enough. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced as I pieced together every detail of my plan. I wasn't just going to ruin Mason and Marcy's affair, I was going to dismantle the carefully curated images they presented to the world. Mason, the devoted husband and self-made man. Marcy, the hard-working assistant with an impeccable moral compass. By the time I was done, no one would look at them the same way again. But first, I needed a way in. The next morning, I sent Mason off with his usual kiss and a reminder to work hard. He smiled, oblivious, and walked out the door. As soon as his truck disappeared down the street, I went to work. I called Julia again. I need to know if Marcy's husband is as blind to all this as I was. Julia didn't disappoint. By noon, she'd uncovered that Marcy's husband, Greg, was an insurance broker who worked long hours. A quick check of his Facebook page showed that he was a doting father to their 2 young kids. The perfect, unsuspecting mark. I'll pay him a visit, I told Julia. That's bold, she said. But if anyone can pull it off, it's you. Just, be careful. People don't always react how you think they will. I wasn't worried about Greg. I was worried about what I'd find when I walked into Marcy's perfect suburban life. That evening, I drove to their house. It was nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of place with manicured lawns and kids' bikes on every driveway. I parked a block away and walked up, my pulse quickening with every step. When Greg opened the door, he looked surprised but polite. Can I help you? I'm sorry to bother you, I said, forcing my voice to tremble slightly. But it's about your wife. His expression hardened. What about Marcy? I hesitated, clutching the envelope I'd prepared. Can we talk inside? It's sensitive. Greg led me into their living room, the walls adorned with family photos. 2 kids peeked out from the hallway, their wide eyes full of curiosity, before Greg shooed them upstairs. He offered me a seat, but I stayed standing, the envelope clutched tightly in my hands. Look, I don't know how to say this, so I'll just say it. Your wife is having an affair with my husband. The words hit him like a punch. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for a response. Finally, he said, that's not. Are you sure? I handed him the envelope. I'm sorry. But this isn't just a hunch. This is proof. He opened it with trembling hands, pulling out the screenshots and photos. His face paled as he flipped through them, his breaths coming faster with each one. This can't be. She wouldn't. She did, I said firmly. And it's been going on for months. Greg's shoulders sagged, and he dropped the papers onto the coffee table. Why are you telling me this? He asked, his voice hoarse. Because I think we both deserve better, I said simply. And because I'm not the kind of woman who lets people walk all over her. Greg nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure they regret this, I said, my voice cold. Every single minute. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, we shared an understanding. He wasn't ready to act yet, but he would be. I could see it in the way his hands curled into fists. As I left the house, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Marcy's fortress was cracking, and I was just getting started. Over the next week, I set my plan into motion. First, I made sure every person in Mason's and Marcy's orbit would see the truth. I sent anonymous emails to the staff at Mason's company, attaching the most damning screenshots and photos. The subject line was simple: your boss isn't who you think he is. Next, I compiled everything Julia had dug up on Marcy, her financial troubles, her questionable past, and sent it to her clients and colleagues. I even left a package on her parents' doorstep. It included a handwritten note: "You raised a liar and a homewrecker." But the piece de resistance? That was for Mason. One night, while he was asleep, I slipped his phone from his nightstand and called Marcy. She answered on the second ring, her voice soft and eager. "Hey, I've been waiting for you to call." "It's not Mason," I said, my voice icy. There was a stunned silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "Anna? What the hell are you?" "You don't get to ask me anything," I cut in. "You've had your fun, Marcy. But it's over. And soon, everyone you know is going to see exactly what kind of person you are." Before she could respond, I hung up. Mason stirred beside me, mumbling something in his sleep. I smiled, placing the phone back in its spot. This wasn't over yet. The real fireworks were still to come. The morning of the confrontation, I felt an eerie calm settle over me. The chaos of the last week, the texts, the emails, the late-night calls, had brought me to this moment. It was time for Mason and Marcy to face the storm they'd created. I started with Mason. He was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the world crumbling around him. I'd timed everything perfectly, ensuring that today would be one he'd never forget. "Morning," I said, setting my mug down with deliberate force. He looked up, startled. "Hey, you okay?" "More than okay," I said, my voice cold. "Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about something." "Sit down." His brow furrowed, but he obeyed, pulling out a chair and sitting across from me. I slid a manila envelope across the table. "Open it." "What's this?" he asked, his tone wary. "Your life," I replied. "Or what's left of it." Confused, he opened the envelope and pulled out the contents. His face drained of color as he flipped through the screenshots, the photos, the printed emails. By the time he reached the last page, his hands were shaking. "Anna, Don't," I snapped, cutting him off. "Don't you dare sit there and try to explain this. I've seen everything. I know everything. And you don't get to lie your way out of this." He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his jaw tightening. I never meant for you to find out like this." "Oh, so you meant for me to find out eventually?" I said with mock sweetness. "How considerate of you." "Anna, listen, it was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless." I laughed bitterly. "Meaningless?" "Months of sneaking around, lying to my face, and building an entire double life, that's meaningless to you?" He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't want your words," I said, leaning forward. "I want your actions. And believe me, Mason, you're about to take plenty of those. Starting with the call you'll get any minute now." As if on cue, his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen, his face contorting when he saw the name, Marcy. "Answer it," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Anna, please. Answer it," I shouted, slamming my fist on the table. He flinched, then picked up the phone with trembling hands. "Hello," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Even from across the table, I could hear Marcy's frantic voice. "Mason, it's everywhere. My parents, my clients, someone sent them all those messages. They know everything." I leaned back, folding my arms as I watched Mason's face twist with panic. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "Don't lie to me." Marcy screamed. "It has to be Anna. She's trying to ruin my life." Oh, don't worry, Marcy, I said loudly, ensuring she could hear me. I'm not trying to ruin your life. I already did. The line went silent for a moment before Marcy's voice returned, this time quieter, but no less furious. You're going to regret this, Anna. No, Marcy, I replied calmly. You're going to regret it. I reached across the table and ended the call, then turned my attention back to Mason. I hope she was worth it, I said coldly. Because you've lost everything. Your reputation, your job, and most importantly, me. His eyes filled with desperation. Anna, we can fix this. Please, don't throw everything away. I stood, looking down at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. You already did that, Mason. And now, you're going to live with the consequences. The fallout was swift and devastating. By the end of the week, Mason's perfect world had unraveled completely. The emails I'd sent to his colleagues and clients didn't just expose the affair, they exposed him as a liar and a fraud. Contracts were pulled, meetings cancelled, and whispers spread through the office corridors. By Friday, Mason was called into a meeting with the board, where he was given a choice: resign quietly or face a public firing. He chose resignation, of course. A coward to the end. Marcy didn't fare much better. Her husband, Greg, took no time to file for divorce, gaining full custody of their kids in the process. She was let go from her position at Mason's company, though not officially for the affair. It was couched as downsizing, but everyone knew the truth. With no job, no husband, and mounting debts, Marcy retreated from her picture-perfect suburban life and disappeared into obscurity. I, on the other hand, thrived. 2 months later, I sat in my lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers. Mason had tried to contest the terms, but with the evidence I had, his lawyer advised him to settle. I got the house, the car, and enough financial support to ensure I wouldn't have to worry for a very long time. Congratulations, Anna, Julia said, sliding the papers into a neat folder. You're officially free. Free, I repeated, letting the words sink in. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Mason's betrayal had shattered me, but it hadn't broken me. If anything, it had made me stronger. The last time I saw Mason was at a coffee shop downtown. He looked older, tired, as though the burden of his mistakes had finally caught up to him. I almost didn't recognize him. But when he saw me, he smiled faintly and walked over. Anna, he said awkwardly. You look good. Thanks, I replied, my tone as neutral as I could manage. You look different. He laughed softly, a bitter sound. Yeah, well. Life has a way of doing that. I didn't respond, and for a moment, we just stood there, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. I know I don't deserve it, he said finally. But I'm sorry. For everything. I studied him, searching his face for sincerity. I saw regret there, but it wasn't enough. It never could be. Apology accepted, I said, though my voice carried no warmth. But it doesn't change anything. I know, he said quietly. I wanted you to know. He turned to leave, but before he walked away, he glanced back. You're strong, Anna. Stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I didn't reply. I just watched as he disappeared into the crowd, a shadow of the man he used to be. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I started my own business, reconnecting with the passions I'd neglected during my marriage. I traveled, made new friends, and rediscovered parts of myself I thought I'd lost. And as for love? I wasn't in a rush. I'd learned the hard way that trust isn't given, it's earned. But one day, I knew, the right person would come along. And this time, I'd be ready. Mason and Marcy had tried to destroy me, but in the end, they only destroyed themselves. I emerged from the wreckage stronger, wiser, and unshakably determined to live life on my own terms. Because betrayal doesn't define you. Survival does.